as we're ready, we'll get started with one. All right, let's get started. This is the deliberations for the April 15th, 2021 Zoning Board of Appeals hearing. No participation by members of the public or applicants. Zoning board members discuss and deliberate cases. So we'll start with case number 1, 1385 Highland.
Okay, so folks, last month, I know most folks, and you heard it, and this month, there was some new information provided in terms of some more details on the renderings. So just folks' thoughts. I think pretty much the board, I took a straw poll that the first piece in terms of the setbacks that folks were, because we're looking at the setbacks here, and then we're looking at the piece about the designated buildings of historic value. So looking at those two pieces, what are folks' thoughts on the setback and the design changes to the architectural features of the home?
I'm good with all of it now.
I'm fine.
Yeah,
I'm fine too.
So secluded, I
At a
think.
bigger house.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was, I think the information that was provided and the standards was sufficient enough. So any other questions or comments? I guess.
Kudos to the applicant for reaching out to the public feedback person, because the person submitted feedback that was in favor after they had first submitted against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We just need a motion, then we can keep moving.
Make a motion to grant.
Well, second.
Okay, and I'll just poll everyone. Matt Bain?
Grant.
Jim?
Grant.
Tyrese?
Grant.
Lorene?
Grant.
Cora?
Grant.
Joe?
Grant.
And Holly?
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes 7-0. Next case is 131 Harvard Street. This is the driveway.
Hey, so
I have to
Go ahead.
say that, it's interesting because I was on my bike and I went by each and every house on both sides of the street, and I counted 11 driveways that were similar to hers.
Me too.
Now, and then all of that from John, I appreciate what he's saying, but my goodness, 3/4 of the street has the same setup that she does.
Yep.
So how are you going to implement something like that when the majority rules, I think, or, come up with some other way to deal with that? I mean, that's my opinion.
I'm with you on that one. I just thought, and I won't get into, and I apologize for the dog in the back.
So that's all right.
I won't get into the details, but in terms of, we as the neighborhood association, I got some concern with that because there was significant support from the neighbors on the street. And I do think it was a part of the character that what she's proposing. I didn't have an issue with it last month, but I do appreciate her going to DES and getting some more information.
I don't have yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Tyrese. I don't have a problem with John, but if they've been around for 60 years, why haven't things changed? I mean, sometimes it's just, I don't know. Anyhow, it's whatever.
I want to talk about the curb cut a little bit because that's what the board had requested. So the existing driveway as shown on the survey map is 17.7 feet from the sidewall of her house to her property line. And DES is willing to entertain a 15-foot wide curb cut realigned. So talk to me a little bit about the matchup or what your thoughts are on that. Because the 15 doesn't match the 17. So I wanted your thoughts on that.
And what is it? Do we know?
Say that again?
What is it now? Do we know how wide it is now?
I think it's probably the standard 8 or 9 because it has like the original curbs. And it's shifted all the way to the closest to the house where it would have originally been. So the expansion that happened over time happened to the left, and the curb cut didn't get expanded, and that's why it's being driven over now.
Okay, so what do we say, like from 9 feet to, what did you just say?
15.
I mean, I think that's significant. I think the 2 feet, it being 2 feet shorter is a lot less significant than it is now.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt,
I don't think it's a big deal because there's still enough room for her to do everything that she needs to do without them driving over that part of it.
Joe, you had a question?
Yeah, last month, I'd asked a question of you and you said, like, I don't even remember the question or response. You said, had she done that, she would have got a permit that day. Do you remember what that was? If it
Oh,
was
yeah,
she
lining
took
up.
the parking to the behind the house?
No, well, if she had taken that front space that's up against the sidewalk that is like under review, if you had like driven up the existing curb cut and on the left side cut out like a triangle extending out toward the neighbors and then extending it to the back.
Yeah. Yeah. So if she had done that, she wouldn't even be here.
Correct.
Okay.
Could you still do that?
Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
If they widen the apron to what, I think you said 15 feet, she could still then taper to the 17 feet wide driveway that she currently has. I mean, in my opinion, that would be better than, just reducing the driveway to fit the apron itself. I have tenants. I have a property with the single driveway, and it creates issue with getting in and getting out. And my tenants I don't have 5 different vehicles in the driveway. So I just imagine it's unrealistic to narrow it any more than it currently is, because it allows the
Am I frozen or is he frozen?
Matt, he's
think
frozen.
Matt's frozen.
He was starting to break up already. But if he's with us, he'll jump back in.
Oh, he's there.
Matt, are you there?
What happened in that?
New things that we say on Zoom. Am I frozen or are you frozen?
No, I kind of figured it was me because nobody was talking. But the solution is to just turn off my video. But as I was saying, I don't know how much you heard, but just in quick summary, narrowing the driveway isn't really a great.
I'm sorry, I can't hear him.
Yeah, we lost him again, but I think we heard him. He was nearing the driveway wasn't the best option. I think he was leading towards and not really feasible. I don't know if anybody else had any additional comment. This is a, high density, high.
Talk to me about,
Go ahead.
I want to address the on-street parking. Talk to me about, just for the first standard about potential detriments to the community. Just any thoughts around the expanding the curb cut, lessening the area for on-street parking? Any thoughts around that?
No, I don't have any. I truly, I was out there. You are.
Me too.
You are not going to lose an on-street parking space. It's not officially 2. So currently right now, I think currently right now you can get 2 small cars and with the existing curb. You can't get 2, like I was driving a Jeep and I parked right next to it. I don't think another large truck could get behind me. So you're not going to lose an off-street parking here. I mean, this is, I think that was kind of brought up last month and it wasn't really clarified, but it's more than that curb is more than 9 feet. That's all you need for a parking space. So you're not going to lose an off-street parking. I think it's really going to clean up the neighborhood, clean up that block because everyone's curb cuts are that size. I think the anomaly is that curb currently, because that one's kind of larger than everybody else's. Because as Lorene mentioned, I counted at least the majority of the homes on that street had that same configuration of parking, not leading to the rear, going from house to house, and they had the apron cut out to that larger size. So I just, yeah, that's where I am. I just think this is like, my opinion is that this is just so straightforward. And I think what John wrote was just so unreasonable. I'll just be completely honest. I just think that was so unreasonable to present that to the applicant, and I can't support that.
What are other board members or other board members?
I do like the wider curb cut centered on what's there now. It would line up better. People would not be driving over grass. Our concern, if I remember correctly, and I think it came from Johanna, is how wide can you make it because of the tree roots and things of that nature. But I believe DES has answered that question. Now, I don't think John's being unreasonable as far as what he wants. I think last time we were talking about possibly having 3 cars along the back and 2 cars on the side rather than all 4 up there right now. But at the same time, we have neighbors who live right there next door across the street who don't have a problem with keeping the cars where they are. And because of that, I'm willing to support this. I would have gone either way. I really would have. One more thing. John Lundbach mentioned he didn't know if that width of that road, the extra edge of the right of way is 2 feet or 4 feet back. I do know from experience in the city of Rochester, the right of way line is generally 6 inches to 12 inches from the edge of the sidewalk onto the property. 4 feet, I don't think I've never seen anything that wide. That's personal experience. That's my work experience.
Jim, Holly, Cora?
My issue was just the curb cut and then her going to DES and getting this solution, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I meant to say Joe. Thank you, Cora and Holly. Joe, any?
No, I'm okay. I don't have any more questions.
I'll make a motion to grant and to accept the standards in the application.
I'll
I'll
second.
second it.
Do you want to connect it to the having to get the DES curb cut as part of it?
Oh, we have to do that as a condition? Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't know I thought that, yeah, we can do that. So I'll make a motion to grant with the condition that the property owner works with DES to widen the curb cut to 15 feet wide as mentioned in the application.
I'll second it.
Okay, and we'll start with Matt.
Grant,
Jim,
Grant,
Tyrese,
Grant.
Lorene,
Grant.
Cora,
Grant.
Joe,
And
and Holly.
Grant.
Motion carries 6-1. Next case is 280 Klein Street.
Okay. Joe, thanks for asking that question about location. I was going to ask that too, because there was no indication on location.
yeah.
Do you think that lightning would strike the house if it strikes? That was my, yeah. So
Those, as Jim can attest to, those things are grounded.
okay.
They have, yeah, your own house, your houses are actually grounded now too. There's a, right. So.
I guess where
My only thing is like,
I want to point something out as far as ham radio goes. I think what the applicant was trying to say is that they're very valuable during disasters. I mean, just think of what happened in Puerto Rico with a hurricane 2 or 3 years ago. It was the ham radio operators who were able to make contact with the real world. When you have a disaster, cell phones don't work because the towers go down. Ham radios do not require that. Ham radios, when they broadcast, they go all directions. It's not a point-to-point like from a microwave tower with a dish pointing to a dish that's 17 miles away. It goes all directions. Plus, it's a radio signal, so it skips off clouds, and that's why sometimes you can go such long distances with it. Now, of course, this has nothing to do whatsoever what we're talking about right now, but here's the term ham radio. That goes way, way, way back to the time of Morse code, where a person who was sending Morse code was kind of slow. They said he was ham-fisted, which is a derogatory term. And when the radios came out, of course, those were professional things in the 20s and the 30s. But when the amateurs came out, and that's what a ham radio is, derisively, the pros call them hams, but now it's a popular term. I was thinking about what Joel said about possibly moving
Jim,
that antenna right to
Jim, I heard that they were eating ham sandwiches. That's why it was called that.
Nope, afraid not. Good try though. You could put that tower right at the edge of the house, and because he's got 30 feet, if it was a 30-foot tower, to bring that tower down. And that was a good point, Joe. By the way, most ham radio operators or antennas were on the roofs. They were not on towers. I see no problem with lightning. As far as what the site looks like or what it's going to look like 10 feet, 5 feet or 10 feet higher than the roof, I don't have much of an issue with it. So I think I'll stop my sayings right there.
I have one of these in my neighborhood, and it has to be more than 30 feet because it is so much bigger than the house. And I can't see it from my house, but every time I walk by it, I think about the fact that I would never have bought a house within view of it. Like the house next door to it sold at one point, and I wondered like if the asking price was impacted by the enormity of that tower at all. And he, his direct neighbors, he said, we're okay with it. And I do like that it's easily or at least able to be disassembled. But, I think that attaching it to the house, like right up against the house and making it shorter seems like it would mitigate some of that eyesore concern.
I guess the one thing that I was curious about is that he says when he drives around in his car, which is 8 foot high, he can pretty much talk to anybody, at least in the eastern half of the United States. So at 30 feet high, I know he talked about wanting to be able to talk to people even internationally in that, but if you can reach out to people at 8 foot high, I don't know that it needs to be necessarily 30. He said he was willing to go down to 25, but why isn't the 15 even good enough? I mean, I'm not sure if a ham.
Would the house block the signal then?
Well, maybe that's a good point, Joanna. Yeah, I guess I'm not sure why the ham operator, and if it talks about all this emergency stuff, needs to be in contact with somebody on halfway across the country in an emergency, because what are they going to do about it from here anyway? So,
and my concern with that, and I kind of maybe just not to push back on, but Johanna, to that point, I think he would have said specifically, okay, no, it needs to be. When Joe brought that up, he was like, oh yeah, I can put it behind the house. So I think if the signal would have been blocked, that he would have maybe said, no, it needs to be out in the middle of the yard where there's no obstructions around. So I don't know if that would be an issue. Right now, I'm, I was looking at, because I saw what some other locales were doing, but the other thing is enforcement. Other locales had, because there wasn't enough data on how the frequency impacted other frequencies in the area. And other locales had, just regulations on when they could transmit, that's why I asked the question, because in other municipalities, I saw that they required, ham operation can go from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. After 6 p.m., it has to come down to 21 feet. In some locales it had that, and that the ham operator could only, they could transmit during local emergencies. But there's just no way to really enforce that on our end, because the city doesn't do that.
There's no way to enforce. I mean, that's only as good as anyone's enforcement.
Yeah, no question. Right now I'm at, I'll be willing to give him 21 feet. I'm not willing to approve it. That's where my straw poll is at 30 feet. I just think that's way too high for the neighborhood. So I don't
Joe,
know.
you brought up a point during the hearing based on the height of the house. You had estimated at about 25 with the chimney, you think?
No, well, with the chimney, yeah, I've estimated about 20 without, because it's the first floor is raised about 3 feet. Figure the first floor, which structures 8 to 9, and the second floor with the peaks, another 8 to 9. So that's where I came up with my 20 feet. And if he tucked it up against the back of the house, maybe we give him just a little bit above the peak, as Johanna points out, so it doesn't interrupt the signal. So maybe somewhere between, I'm with Therese on this, I'm somewhere between 21 and 25.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Provided
it
it's,
I think it should
provided
be
it's
25,
up against the house.
25 and up against the house.
Well, there's the dormer off the side too with the chimney in the back, so that might mitigate any visual impact from the right of way. So that
But I wonder if you can go in those odd increments though.
Well, he put
Could
it.
could we condition it to be no higher than the chimney and up against the house?
Well, that might be what actually blocks the signal of the chimney, that maybe not to exceed, 2 feet above the chimney or something like that.
I like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So
Well,
in order
against
to,
the house.
How high did you say it was the chimney? You think?
probably close to 21, 22. I would say if the chimney doesn't block the signal as high as the chimney, but no more than 25 feet.
Maybe it should be 25, simply because if the chimney is a problem, it would go above the chimney.
Well, but I'm just suggesting that if the chimney's not an issue, it should be no higher than the chimney. If the chimney is, then no higher than 25.
That's where I am, Joe. If the blockage isn't an issue, it shouldn't even be higher than it. I mean,
Yeah. So I'm just saying we condition it, and that he would have to show specific information to the zoning office that the chimney would block the signal. It'd have to be some sort of a
He
confirmation.
seems to know a lot about it. I think he would know.
Oh, yeah, it seems exceptionally knowledgeable about it, more than we are.
It'd be interesting to find out what the real reasons are. I want to point out to the board members that if you turn on a radio anywhere in your house, you're going to hear it. And that's with the metal screening up on the roof for insulation and walls and solid metal, you still hear it. TV is a different story. If you have a TV on the third floor and you're in a certain spot, you may get blocked. You don't get blocked with radio waves, they go through stuff. They don't. Those are radio waves.
you said it. Sorry, I didn't hear you. You said it doesn't get blocked, Jim?
Radio waves do not get blocked by insulation or metallic issues.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
So
I just think he's a ham operator, fanatic, like somebody said, most of them are, and I think they are. I think that's just what he is. He's a young guy. That's what he does.
Yeah.
His father did
So
it.
I would make a motion to grant, provided the location is up against, as close as he technically can make it to the house and no higher than the chimney.
I
Unless
go
he
along
can
with
prove
that.
otherwise.
It makes sense to me.
So tucked in, let me just make sure I have this right. Tucked in rear yard as close to the house as can be done. And it cannot exceed the height of the existing chimney.
Yeah, I think it'd save him a lot of money. I looked at the detail of that foundation. It's 4 foot deep by 5'5" in concrete. If he can attach that antenna to the house, he would save on a lot of
Yeah, I
money.
think you can do the, what do they call it, the
concrete
guy wires that go to the.
Yeah. So that's the motion I would make, and unless he can come back and prove there's a technical reason why it has to be higher than the chimney, then I would limit it to the height of
You
the
don't
chimney.
know how high the chimney is. How high is it?
Right, but they're saying to mitigate potential visual impacts as brought by the neighbors, that regardless of how high it is, that's what the board would be willing to entertain, no higher.
Well, I look at it this way, definitely know that chimney's not 30 feet high.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's
So-
not.
I'm-
And the houses in the neighborhood, Joe, they're all pretty, they're not really high houses, in general, in the neighborhood. Not really the character of them. So I think there's a motion out there on the floor. We got the motion, Matt?
Yeah, no height in the rear yard attached to the house as much as closest to the house. And no, not to exceed the height of the existing chimney.
I'll second the motion.
Matt,
Deny.
Jim,
Grant,
Tyrese,
Deny.
Lorene,
Deny.
Cora,
Deny.
Joe,
Grant.
and Holly.
Deny.
All right, folks, we're going to have to go through these standards.
Yeah, because
You have
that's
to
not
explain what the basis of this denial is.
Yeah, we didn't discuss, what was discussed was really the motion that was put on the table. So let's go back to the beginning on this one. If the board was inclined to deny it, we'll have to run through these now. The benefit to the applicant outweighs any detriments to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood.
There's nothing in here about the neighborhood.
well, the opposition, there's two people were against the height of what that would look like. Also, one board member didn't like those antennas.
So the benefits to the applicant were done well, right? You don't have any questions. There's no questions about the benefit to the applicant.
Right.
So you're making the argument that they do not outweigh the detriment. So what detriments to the neighborhood exist that are not outweighed?
There's the visual eyesore. There's probably a nicer word for eyesore, but that's the one I have.
And that wasn't going to be mitigated if it was attached to the house and no taller than the chimney?
I think for the neighbors across the street, yes, but not for anybody who's next door in their backyard or.
Yeah, the east, north, or south would still be visible.
Was there any testimony that that was going to be an issue?
One of the persons that called in talked about what it was going to look like, I think. How about that person that wrote the letter? Didn't they refer to what it was going to look like also?
Yep, Karen McGill or Kathy McGill and then Miss P both mentioned that in their testimony as well. And in terms of welfare, I think, for me personally, it was just not enough information in terms of what the welfare action, if the tower was granted, what the welfare and impact. I didn't have enough information to support the applicant's definition because I don't think it's enough information in terms that was brought to the board and brought to me where I can say that the welfare of the community in the neighborhood wouldn't be negatively impacted because there's a lot of information out there in terms of what impact that these signals could have. And then, of course, I do support the testimony of Ms. McGill and Ms. P in terms of the visual aspect of a detriment in the community. It's definitely not in character with the neighborhood. As I was mentioning, a lot of these, especially off this Norton, a lot of the homes to me come off as, I think a good chunk of them are ranch style homes. So they're not high homes in the first place. So this definitely would be something that's out of line and out of character with that Norton area. I think there was another remedy. I would have, the applicant could have did the tower where you could change the height levels. It would have been obviously a cost impact to the applicant, but that's something that they obviously explored. They mentioned in their oral testimony, but it was a cost factor, but it's something that they could have done to kind of remedy this and bring up other ways that the board may have approved the application. Significance,
Let me just hang on one second, Terry. So I want to jump back to that because I'm writing all this stuff down for the standards. So for no other remedy, the question is can it be achieved by a feasible alternative or a feasible alternative to the variance? So if he's saying he can't afford it, is it a feasible option for him, the one that adjusts?
I think it is. If you can't afford something. If you can't afford $10,000.
So it is, you're saying, so then it's not a feasible alternative.
No, that he could afford.
No, you're right, Matt. No, you're right. The financial feasibility is, that is a true statement. So I do take that back. With there being no other remedy. Obviously, the other remedy is allowing, a 15-foot tower is, being code compliant. And I think during the testimony, the applicant mentioned that their 8-foot mobile antenna was able to reach different areas. So I think when you're kind of looking at these standards, I think it was all personal on what the applicant wanted to reach and whom they wanted to reach, because there obviously are other antennas and there's other height levels that they could meet these means of communicating to other ham radio folks across the country. But for whatever reason, which I don't think was clear in the testimony, they wanted this height. I think he kind of touched on talking to people internationally, but it really wasn't in great detail on specifically why this height. And Lorene kind of questioned him on that. Your mobile, 8-footer is able to reach X amount of people. Why can't, you put a 15-footer up? And, and that data wasn't presented, that information wasn't presented to me as a board member clearly to be able to make that judgment.
He dismissed it, really. I think he just, wants to get it as high as he can. He just dismissed it. I'm not sure why, but.
The requested variance is substantial. I think it's pretty substantial.
Based on what?
Nobody else has them in the neighborhood? Sorry.
And it's the size of what's allowed.
I think double of what the code requires is pretty significant. If it was something around, that's why I was entertaining getting folks to think about doing other sizes. But I think this was pretty significant in size. And I think even with the 20-footer, I didn't have enough information on how tall those homes actually were. And then how they're situated in terms of how I was viewing this house, because, I didn't walk all the way in the rear because I don't do that. But from the driveway standpoint, his backyard is pretty visible from the front of the house. I was standing kind of at that double driveway, kind of looking back into his backyard. And so his yard is pretty visible to the community. So I think any level would have been pretty significant above the 15 feet that's allowed.
So I just want to make sure I understand this.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about not much information. Board members have mentioned there's not enough information, but you just made mention of anything beyond 15 is too much. So are there any board members that would like more information, or is it anything beyond what the code allows is too significant?
I'd like more information, because I'd like to know what he just was. I don't know, if I back up, I could almost agree with Joe and go that route. But what I'm thinking is, it wasn't enough information. So, how tall is your house? How tall is the chimney? What are the specifics and reasons why you cannot deal with a 15-foot antenna or whatever, simply because you seem to be okay reaching a lot of people with your mobile 8-foot unit. Is that what it is, Tyrese? 8 feet, his mobile?
Yeah, that's what he said.
So,
That was actually part of the reason why I asked originally, like, who are you trying to reach? Why?
I think they try to reach all kinds. He might want to reach Puerto Rico. He might want to reach, you know,
But
Cuba. I don't know.
to kind of like close this up.
Yeah.
In terms of significance, mine wasn't. I don't need any more, information in terms of height level of the house. I think in terms of the impact of the tower, again, I don't think there is much information that the applicant can bring, or unless the city is really willing to do a deep dive into these towers and their impacts in other communities. I think that's the only thing additional that would change. But I don't think the
What impact, Tyrese, are you talking about? I mean, we're talking the visual impact is not anything the city can provide. I mean, that's your call. But what other impacts are you talking about?
I think in terms of what the tower, potentially what impact the tower and its frequencies can have on other users, because that's pretty much the information that I saw, throughout the country, is that there's such an unknown on what that environmental impact will be.
Oh,
More of an environmental.
So are you talking about the radio frequency, or are you talking about the interference with other?
Both.
Well, because the FCC has ruled that you can't deny, municipalities can't deny approvals of antennas based on radio frequency issues.
Okay.
The other issue of whether it interferes with somebody's cell phone or somebody's television or that, if you want him to provide more information about that, you could request that. The city doesn't have that information, but I think that information is available, and you could request that he provide that to you just to confirm that antenna will not interfere with reception of somebody's television or other electronic equipment that they may have in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that was my first question under environmental conditions. I didn't ask about the radio. I want to know if it interferes with TV signals.
Yeah.
He said it won't. How do I know that's true? I don't know if that's true.
He testified that it did not, but you could require him to provide you with some documentation of that.
True.
what does everybody else think? Tyrese, ask everybody else. What does everybody else think?
I'll jump in and say that more information in terms of what the difference is in terms of reach from a 15-foot, which is allowed, versus 30 or 25, which he said he was okay with. What's the difference? I would need more information in that regard to really consider it further.
I would support that.
Yeah, me too.
Given that I think Tyrese mentioned that this is unique, and this is the first time in all the years I've been on the zoning board we've had a tower. So maybe we do need to learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let me.
He mentioned something that the FCC also does not allow denial of these if they are reasonable. And I honestly don't know what that means for ham radio towers. I've worked on some other areas of telecommunications, but this is not an area I'm familiar with. So, I can see if I can find out some more about that as well.
That would be helpful.
Of course, the question, what's reasonable is.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to hold this case.
Okay.
I'll second it.
I guess we can go through, we're doing a vote on a hold. We'll start with Matt.
Grant?
Jim.
Old.
Tyrese.
Hold.
Lorene.
Hold.
Cora.
Hold.
Joe.
Hold.
And Holly.
Hold.
Sorry, I didn't know that was the terminology that we're using.
You know, let's, you probably should make a motion formally to rescind your
Decision.
prior
Yeah.
vote, because you did come to a vote.
So I'll make a motion to rescind the previous motion to grant case number 4.
I'll second that.
Case 3.
Case 3.
Case three. Case three.
I'm looking ahead. I'm looking ahead.
We're gonna do this. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed, please say nay. Okay.
Now, Matt and Johanna, and maybe Joe also, I know that between 2003 and 2006, we had a request for a tower, whether it was a ham tower or a radio tower, I'm not sure, but it's gonna be in your records. And I was on either Knickerbocker, Avis, or Pullman Avenue, one of those 3 streets. I don't remember how we voted, I just remember we voted on it. I can probably look it up, you know, right on your website. But
Knickerbocker, Avis, or what was the other one?
Pullman,
Pullman.
one of the 3 streets just west of Dewey Avenue.
Got it.
Definitely.
I think I started on the zoning board January 1st, 2007. So,
Okay,
Just missed
Joe's
it.
off the hook.
I agree with Joe. I think like Tyrese did some research. We probably all should, just be more knowledgeable.
It'll
All
go.
right. Case number 4, the last case, 102 Colby Street. We should probably have 2 conversations here. One is that you're willing to entertain an expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use. And then if the answer to that question is yes, then you can talk about
What the
configuration.
configuration is.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess folks, how are folks feeling about, you know, the granting of the expanding the non-conforming use up to the 4th floor? That case and that testimony was kind of weird. So I was sorry to take so much time, but I just wanted to make sure we were pretty clear on, and the applicant was clear on what was going on, because I know sometimes applicants don't know what's happening. So what are folks' thoughts on that? Just expanding that non-conforming use, knowing that it cannot become apartment 4, no matter what the decision is.
One thing that I wanted to clarify or get clarification on was whether or not that kitchen could be on the 3rd floor.
Yeah, I got confused on that too.
Here too.
Matt, do you have any insight in that?
Say that for me again. I missed what you said. I'm sorry.
The 3rd floor kitchen, is that
How to get there?
okay? Is that accepted by code?
So what's accepted? The answer right now is no. There's to be no occupancy on the 3rd floor. So at some point between an inspection before and the inspection now, someone did a whole ton of work up there, installed a kitchen, installed a bathroom, did all this work.
Oh,
So this board has the authority to, so if you say, hey, he can keep the kitchen on the 3rd floor, then he has to remove one somewhere else in the house. So when we talk about configuration, he has to legalize it somehow with a kitchen. If he leaves the 3rd one, he's got to remove one on, the 2nd floor.
Unless you folks feel strongly about what configuration he has, you could simply approve expansion of one of the 2 apartments into the 3rd floor, or that the 3rd floor becomes 1 apartment and the 2nd floor becomes 1 apartment. But it would require, in any event, the removal of 1 kitchen, and leave it up to him to figure out what's the most feasible, reasonable way to do it. Now, if you feel strongly that you want it done one way or the other, you could vote on that. But one option is to simply say, remove 1 kitchen and have 3 apartments, period.
I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
I mean, he seemed pretty willing to do whatever we were going to tell him to do. And he seemed sort of, contrite about having done it the wrong way. Maybe it's just because he says sir and ma'am, and, I always like that. But
Your students don't say that, Holly?
The military students do. My veterans say it all the time.
That's what they say on the ships.
Yeah, so, I'm okay with it. But, I think that, I think the fact that he wasn't willing to say, I need it to be this way, I think for me meant a lot, because it sort of said he's willing to do what he needs to do to meet what he needs to meet. And I think if we were to say, yes, you have to take out a kitchen, I think giving him the flexibility to pick the one that works best, I think is better, because then he can figure out what's sort of more affordable and what would make the least amount of disruption to the people who are already living there. And I just sort of think that's a nicer way to go, even though,
Yeah, because the only other real option
I
is to
agree.
say, you could, the two options are no expansion on the third floor whatsoever, or expansion on the third floor, provided it's not a kitchen, exactly the way Johanna put that option.
Yeah.
But there is the option to say you can't have anything up there too, but.
Correct. Let's
Right,
run
Joe?
through the standards on the expansion. So these, think of these standards as the applicant, if you're willing to entertain the expansion, think of it as just the fact that a 3-family dwelling is expanding in a low density district. And which is maybe fine based on the fact that, it's low density on paper, but in real life, there's a lot of apartments or what have you, so it's low density on paper, but functionally and operationally out in the field, it's, so let's run through the standards here. The benefit to the applicant outweigh any detriments to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or the community by the granting of the variance.
I know he didn't say much, but I'm okay with it. I think that lots of buildings in that area have lots of apartments, and I don't think that what he already did, even though he shouldn't have, is really detrimental in any way to the places around that.
I would agree, except for the impact it has on parking, because even though he does meet it by the code, as Matt says, the reality is there's 5 bedrooms then in that place, potentially 5 bedrooms, I think.
Mhm. Yes,
Could
he
be
said.
1.5 to 2 cars ratio. That's a lot of cars in that for one piece of property.
But that doesn't make it any,
Offsite.
that doesn't actually make it any different than that property over in was it Harvard? It was the same number of bedrooms.
Yeah, I
So-
agree, you're right.
I
So,
think you
for
could've
the
got
most
5
part,
back. Sorry, I don't know if you went in the back. I think you can get 5 back here, Joe, but I know I get what your point is. I don't know if you drove in the back. It's pretty, he's got a lot of asphalt back there.
No, I get that, but I always say these days, a 1 bedroom could be a couple living together. They each have a car, and the reality is,
Yep.
it's,
No, I'm with you.
But the
I think
code,
he testified that he has 5 parking spaces.
yeah, he
Right.
meets the code. So
He does.
I think Colby Street has parking. I know there's a lot of apartments, so it's probably needed, but on parking on both sides of the street all the
it does.
time,
They
It
do.
if I
does.
remember correctly.
It does.
It doesn't alternate. So that, helps a little bit as well. Essential character of the neighborhood, we talked about this a little bit based on the configuration of the existing structures. Anyone have anything else on that?
No, he's not altering the exterior.
Yeah, there's nothing. Everything is internal. You can't really. You won't. The
Okay.
character won't change. Yeah.
Okay. Any other feasible alternative to get the same benefit?
no.
I think so.
No.
Is it a substantial variance request?
I'd say no.
The floor area, I think it's under 500 square feet up there. It's 486 or something, yeah, 46.
It would have been nice to see pictures, of course. Everybody's already mentioned that at this point, but if we knew how quote unquote finished it already is and how it looks, then we'd be able to answer that question with a little more confidence.
Well,
Views on the ship.
finished. It's finished. Any adverse impact on physical conditions in the neighborhood? I know you've mentioned no, substantial exterior changes or no exterior changes. Anything else on this one?
No, I think no changes. And in terms of the parking, I think there's plentiful parking. And
You said you looked out back, Tyrese, and there's plenty of room out there.
yeah, I drove my Jeep back there, almost hit the house, but I got it back there. Yeah, I drove back there.
We'll leave that first part out of the decision.
It's a tight drive. I mean, the getting the drive going to the back is tight. But there's, and there's a garage. I mean, we didn't ask the question, but Joe, you could, one of the tenants could park in the garage. There's a one car back there too.
Okay.
You drove back there, huh?
Yeah.
I was back there too to turn my car around. Plenty of parking.
See, did you get your car back there? I didn't turn. Yeah. I couldn't turn
Yeah,
mine. I
sure.
just went back.
I got my Corolla back there. I
I
hate to say
needed
it, but I thought I saw 4 meters in the back of the building. 3 were operational.
And obviously with the self-creation, I mean, that one's pretty.
Well, the benefit can outweigh the fact that it's
Yep.
self-created.
That one's a pretty no-brainer there. Do we need to add the condition, or will building do this? I just would like to add the condition that fire escape is added to the rear and the front for the 3rd floor. Or will building?
I don't want to add the fire escape because applicants now can also have the option of sprinklering the space.
Okay.
Joe can probably talk a little bit more about this. I think actually the building code has tried to move away from the exterior fire escapes.
Yes.
Okay. No
Yeah.
problem.
And they
Just if you want to, Tyrese, make sure it's that his C of O meets all building codes, and they're going to make sure the building
Yeah,
department's
That's
going
what
to
I
make sure
figured.
it
That's
meets
what I
code.
figured as well. I know they got a strict one over there in that area, a code enforcement. So yeah, I know they're gonna make sure.
Any other thoughts on any of the standards of this application that anyone has?
Did he say he was a merchant marine with Homeland Security? Is that what he said he was?
I think that's right.
Merchant marine?
I heard something about Homeland Security.
Yeah, I thought I heard, I just wasn't clear on merchant marine.
Mhm.
Well, I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to make a motion to grant that the expansion into the 3rd floor, provided a kitchen is removed and somewhere else in the house.
I'm gonna second that.
All right, we'll go through Matt,
Grant,
Jim,
Grant,
Tyrese,
Grant.
Lorene,
Grant,
Cora,
Grant.
Joe,
Grant.
and Holly.
Grant.
There it is. All right, that concludes the deliberations for the April 15th, 2020